The Sword in the Stone, T.H. White. London was full to the brim. If Sir Ector had not been lucky enough to own a little land in Pye Street, on which there stood a respectable inn, they would have been hard put to find a lodging. But he did own it, and as a matter of fact drew most of his dividends from this source, so that they were able to get 3 beds between the 5 of them. They thought themselves fortunate. On the first day of the tournament, Sir Kay managed to get them on the way to the lists at least an hour before the jousts could possibly begin. He had lain awake all night, imagining how he was going to beat the best barons in England, and he had not been able to eat his breakfast. Now he rode at the front of the cavalcade, with pale cheeks, and Wart wished there was something he could do to calm him down. From a Child's Garden of Verses by Robert Louis Stevenson. The Land of Counterpane. When I was sick and lay abed, I had 2 pillows at my head, and all my toys beside me lay to keep me happy all the day. And sometimes for an hour or so I watched my leaden soldiers go with different uniforms and drills among the bedclothes through the hills, and sometimes sent my ships in fleets all up and down among the sheets, or brought my trees and houses out, and planted cities all about. I was the giant great and still, that sits upon the pillow hill, and sees before him dale and plain, the pleasant land of Counterpane. The Picture of Dorian Gray, Oscar Wilde. Inside, in the servants' part of the house, the half-clad domestics were talking in low whispers to each other. Old Mrs. Leaf was crying and wringing her hands. Francis was as pale as death. After about a quarter of an hour, he got the coachman and one of the footmen and crept upstairs. They knocked, but there was no reply. They called out. Everything was still. Finally, after vainly trying to force the door, they got on the roof and climbed onto the balcony. The windows yielded easily. Their bolts were old. When they entered, they found, hanging upon the wall, a splendid portrait of their master as they had last seen him, in all the wonder of his exquisite youth and beauty. Lying on the floor was a dead man, in evening dress, with a knife in his heart. He was withered, wrinkled, and loathsome of visage. It was not till they had examined the rings that they recognized who it was. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Robert Louis Stevenson. I must here speak by theory alone, saying not that which I know, but that which I suppose to be most probable. The evil side of my nature, to which I had now transferred the stamping efficacy, was less robust and less developed than the good which I had just deposed. Again, in the course of my life, which had been, after all, 9/10 a life of effort, virtue, and control, it had been much less exercised and much less exhausted, and hence, as I think, it came about that Edward Hyde was so much smaller, slighter, and younger than Henry Jekyll. Even as good shone upon the countenance of the one, evil was written broadly and plainly on the face of the other. Evil besides, which I must still believe to be the lethal side of man, had left on that body an imprint of deformity and decay. And yet, when I looked upon that ugly idol in the glass, I was conscious of no repugnance, rather of a leap of welcome. Dr. Doolittle's Garden, Hugh Lofting. Captain Doolittle then called the roll of his crew, and found that we were all at least alive and kicking, also terribly hungry. Sandwiches and drinks had been put aboard before we left, but these were long since used up. I have never felt so hungry in my life.